Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Figma Better Together with Zeppelin. And today I'm super excited to be joined by Steven from Bombas. Steven, thank you so much for coming on today. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Hey, thanks for having me, June. Yeah, I'm a director of UX design at Bombas. I'm really just work closely with our business partners, our customers, our engineering and product teams to make sure that our e-com site is the best that it can be.
Awesome. Well, super excited to learn more about what Bombas does and how you're using Zeppelin and Figma better together. I'm June, and I'm a developer and design evangelist at Zeppelin. And today I'm joined by Mike Pitt. Mike, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hello. Yes. Thank you, June. So my name is, in fact, Mike Pitt. Don't forget it. I'm on the customer success crew at Zeppelin, and I work in what's called our scale function.
Very cool. Very cool. So thank you so much for joining us as well. And Steven, back over to you. Can you tell us a little bit about what Bombas actually does?
Yeah, so Bombas is a comfort-focused apparel brand with a mission to help those in need. It was founded from a need for socks for homeless shelters, basically. Socks are the #1 requested item for homeless shelters. Underwear and t-shirts are #2 and 3 respectively. We've recently added those to what we sell. But basically for every item purchased, there's a specifically designed item that's donated to those in need. And to date, Bombas has donated more than 45 million items to the homeless community.
Yeah, that's really, really cool that the company was founded by a problem and that you're actually solving that problem. So that's awesome. Switching gears to your team over at Bombas, can you tell us a little bit about what your team does?
Yeah, so really, I mean, we're responsible for the digital product design of the site. The title product designer is a little confusing in a company that sells physical product, but we manage like digital UX design, and work closely with engineering and product to make sure that like we're meeting the needs of our customers, the business needs, merchandising teams. Yeah, basically just making sure our site is operational and the best of it can be.
Okay, Steven. Yeah, thank you so much for telling us a little bit more about what Bombas does and what your team does over there. Now, can you tell us a little bit about your team's workflow?
Yeah, so we try to keep it kind of flexible, design is not linear, and so we try to make sure that like we don't apply the same process to every project.
Mhm.
Um, that takes a little bit of like nuance and kind of understanding where the team is at and their understanding of the possibilities of what we could do to solve a specific problem. So sometimes we'll come in early and we'll kind of like rough out concepts for how we could solve this problem. Sometimes if it's a little more straightforward, we'll just start with kind of more refined wireframes. But it kind of we like to keep it flexible because like it helps kind of get everyone on the same page at early stages in some projects where the range of solutions might be wider. Yeah, basically like by exploring concepts and sharing them early, we can sort of determine as a team if we're all like on the same page or if the direction we're going is making sense. Sort of choose one of the concepts that we collectively think makes sense, and then head in that direction with more specific wireframes. Sometimes we realize that like none of the concepts are right and things have changed, and so we kind of it goes back in a loop, and there's sort of this like iterative process of going back to the drawing board, I guess. But usually, I can't think of a time that isn't worth it. In the end, it always feels like the more kind of like sharing and like feedback we get and more chances we have to like think about it and iterate, usually it results in like a better product.
Got it. So, Steve, you talked a little bit about flexibility and being iterative. Do you use Figma to do this, or do you use Zeppelin to kind of mock these designs up? How does that fit in?
Yeah, like most of kind of like Figma is really good for the iterative kind of like really flexible stuff. find kind of like early on, it's good to just be like exploring things in there. But there's like a downside to that too, which is kind of like, at a handoff stage, like later, or even in sometimes like at a stage where we're sharing things and writing down requirements, it's maybe a little too flexible. It's a little too easy to change stuff. It's a little too easy for someone to be looking at the wrong screen. Yeah, so it's really good for that kind of iterative exploring things and like trying something, throwing it away, trying something else, like keep doing that. But yeah, once we get into like a more refined version of what we're trying to build, it's helpful to have something a little more rigid.
Got it. And then in terms of, rigid and structure, is that where Zeplin comes in, to actually hand that off over to developers?
Yeah, totally. It's like we kind of use that as like the clear source of truth when we're building something. That way, everybody knows that like the thing in Zeppelin is like the most up to date, like official version of like what we're planning to build or in the process of building, or looking back at, did we build it wrong? So yeah, I mean, it's really like helps us be organized about what we're trying to build and like how to find the correct plan for what we're going to build.
Yeah. So thank you so much for telling us a little bit about your workflow, Steven. And now let's talk about some of the challenges you faced before you had Zeplin and Figma.
Yeah, I mean, really, like when I joined the team, it was we had no kind of infrastructure of design system or handoff process or anything like that. We basically just had design files that were mostly from an agency, lots out of date, lots of like unclear, like is this built, is this real, like is it gonna be real, like a lot of questions basically, like unclear source of truth. So I think one of the first things we try to do is like establish that sort of truth in our design tool and then like share it through Zeppelin, so that anybody who's building stuff like knows kind of like what the real version is, and there's less confusion about like, do I have the right file, do I have, is this out of date, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting, Steven, because you mentioned like this whole workflow was like moving from wireframes to like high fidelity mockups, right? And then passing it over to engineering. And we also talked about how like, design is this very like iteration heavy process, right? Like you even said yourself, the more iterations that we do, the better our design actually becomes. But then you're saying that introduces that problem of like, hey, what is this finalized design? Like, what is this source of truth? What do I hand off? What are we going to build?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit too easy to change things in a design tool, like after the team is already aligned on what's going to be built. And that's good. Like we want to still be able to do that, because like maybe we have new ideas for like the next version of this thing. As a design team and as a product team, we want to be able to do that. We just don't want to create confusion about like what we're building, like what we've agreed on building. This is a problem in-house. It's even like a bigger problem like with vendors, when you basically have a contract that says we're going to build this thing. So that's kind of one of the reasons that we were like, okay, Zeppelin has a lot of value here as like a tool that we can hand this off, and it has like a little bit more rigidity, and is a reliable source of truth rather than something that's like constantly changing.
So, Steven, you just walked us through some of the challenges you faced before you had Zeppelin and Figma. Can we talk a little bit about how Zeppelin addresses those challenges?
Yeah. So one of the ways is like, just using Zeppelin as the source of truth, like the official source of truth for finalized designs. Like if it's not in Zeppelin, it's not going to be part of the shipped product. There's a lot of things that we do in Figma that like aren't official, but when they get uploaded to Zeppelin, we review them for the rest of the team. That's when it becomes kind of like the source of truth and the agreed upon thing that we plan to build. it really, I mean, not only that, but it helps people find things in an organized way. Like when we're, using uh, design tools to organize things that can be messy, but having a standardized way in Zeppelin sort of takes some of that out of the equation. And yeah, I mean, really, that just like ultimately is like time saving. It's like a speed and quality thing where if people can find stuff faster, then they can focus more on their work rather than finding things. And yeah, Zeppelin is the spot where we do that, where we hand off the wireframes.
Yeah, that's really great. So you definitely have a spot now for the whole team to come in and collaborate across all different disciplines. And you talked about how it saves you time. Can you? I'm just curious. Can you quantify how much time that saves you on average?
Boy, I don't know, but it's a lot. I mean, when I
Okay.
think back to like other teams I've been on where, you know, predating this kind of tool, or like, God forbid, like handing things off in sketch files, like it's a mess. It's a total mess. So this definitely is a huge boost, and I would never go back to doing it the other way. Yeah,
Cool. Cool.
but I don't know if I can do a specific number. Might be tough, but it's a lot, a lot.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, no worries. I kind of put you on the spot there. I was just curious for all our viewers out there on how much the savings has that reflect your team. And then from that savings, now your developers could actually, you know, put out more code and your designers could actually do more design stuff. Switching gears now to collaboration. I think we talked about a little bit before how now that you have Zeppelin, it's easier for technical people and non-technical disciplines to work in a tool like Zeppelin. Can you speak a little bit about that, Steven?
Yeah, I mean, it's an easy way to share things. It's like a link with an account is like, it pretty much doesn't get easier than that, as far as just directing someone to a specific screen. Um, and I mean, it goes from engineers to, you know, business partners like merchandising teams, that haven't worked in design or haven't even worked on like a digital product team before. It actually is like one of the easier ways that we can share like specifics about like what we're planning to build, and making sure that they're on kind of the same page and in agreement.
Cool. Mike, did you want to chime in here?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, it's like it's interesting to think about how just something as simple as like the UI of a tool can affect like the efficiency, the efficacy of your process, right? Like like we're designers, right? Like what we're doing is like creating these experiences for certain kinds of people and certain kinds of roles. And what you're saying is like, hey, like we were having trouble in Figma, other people were having trouble in Figma because that experience isn't necessarily built for those people. And then you're saying like, hey, when we moved to Zeppelin, like that experience for them was a lot easier to pick up because it's specifically built for that broader audience.
Totally. I mean, it's like we think about like users. It's like in this case, like the user is like the engineer or the business partner that needs to see what we're going to do, and like making it easier for them just kind of makes it work better. If it's a complicated tool, people are less likely to figure out or use it correctly. So, a simple tool is great. Yeah.
Yeah, just going back to that time saving thing we just talked about, I think having those locked or finalized designs really helps expedite how developers actually, could actually develop, could actually have all the things that they need in one spot. Your technical specs, your components, your textiles, your colors, your spacing. They have it in one spot so they could actually, you know, um, turn out more code. But in top of that, you have things like sections and tags that makes organization and navigation easier, right, Stephen?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, we're still kind of always improving this kind of workflow here, but I think like just having the things organized in Zeppelin in like a easy to find way with kind of common language, rather than like some long file name or something. Like it really helps people find the right screen faster, and then kind of give them the locked view of the agreed upon thing that we all know is like what we're planning to build. And I think that, yeah, just like speeds up the whole process for everyone.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I've been hearing that from a lot of our users as well. And just curious, in terms of getting new team members onboarded with Zeppelin, can you tell us a little bit about how that experience is in terms of someone brand new, they want to get up and start in Zeppelin. How does that experience look like?
Yeah, I mean, really, like we basically have just kind of like a tips onboarding doc for Zeppelin, and it's just like a one sheet of like how we use it and like kind of just basic things that sometimes people don't realize they can do, or like it's kind of sometimes it's a bit of like a people haven't used something like that before, so they're like, what is this even for, really? So we kind of, I'll usually give them a quick rundown, you know, send them an account invite, send them the one sheet, and then I mean, really, that's usually it. Like they pick it up pretty quickly, so pretty low lift.
That's really, really cool to hear. I've been noticing that as well, where new people can just, get up and running with like a one pager instead of, figuring out a complex tool.
Totally.
So lastly, you mentioned that Zeppelin has that structure that your team needs. And Figma has that experimentation, iteration aspect of that. Can you talk a little bit more about how this helps your team?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like I said before, it's like the organization is key. Being able to like share a single screen through a link and say like this is the actual screen, not like this is the whole project, go find the right screen, like that's really helpful. And then also like we concept things and kind of figure out what the direction is in Figma, but then once we're at a stage where we're making like detailed wireframes that are more like a spec, um, it's helpful for people to use Zeppelin to like align on that in detail. And then if things change, like we go back to Figma and like update the work to what was agreed upon to update it as, and then we re-upload that to Zeppelin. And what that does really is just like it's like the place people have to go to find the updated version doesn't change, but the updated version changes when we are intentional about it, not when we're just kind of like experimenting. So really, yeah, it gives us like the structure that we need to sort of hand something off in a way, or like update the handed off work to the change requirements um, in a way that's like easy to understand and like just doesn't leave a lot of room for confusion.
Got it. So it seems that Figma is really the place where you conceptualize different things and iterate really fast. The wireframe stage is all in Zeppelin. And because you have that rigid structure, it allows your team, your whole team, to understand like, hey, this is what's getting built and this is what it's going to get built. And it kind of clarifies what is coming next, right, Steven?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, people can look kind of cross projects too for maybe projects they're not involved in and see like what else the team is working on beyond just their own project.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to hear it, Stephen. It's something I've heard quite a bit, is that like Zeppelin is transformed into this like workflow where like you're doing your iteration in a design tool, but there is this like point in time where you need to say like, hey, this is final. We want to deliver this. And that's like the space that Zeppelin is occupying for a lot of teams, is like we need to give this to development now. And that like process is so sacred, that like you need that tool to facilitate that movement.
Definitely. Yeah.
All right, Steven, thank you so much for preparing this awesome demo. I'm excited to delve into it. Steven, take it away.
Yeah, so this is a project for our new login and sign up flow. It's something that we are just rebuilding. It's pretty dated. It's something that kind of predated our product team's time here, so we're trying to improve it. But there's a lot of screens here, a lot of flows in our Figma file, and kind of one of the first things we do is like make a project to associate with that Figma file. So there's like a place to go that kind of groups this entire project and all the screens associated with it in one place. From there, we start to organize those screens with tags. This way, people can sort of isolate the screens that are relative to their flow and see at least the happy path and maybe all the error states, depending on how we've kind of like what level of detail we put into these. But it's basically just like we try to use common language that everybody can understand, and then tie these back to our requirements doc. But from a high level, it's just like groupings that make sense, that somebody can look at and understand like the feature we're trying to build and kind of the flow of it. Yeah, like if we look back at the Figma file, like there's kind of different directions these screens are going. This designer on our team kind of has one way of doing this, and I think like we all kind of have our own ways that make the most sense to us and are easiest to sort of like design in. She likes to do kind of like horizontal happy path, and then like vertical if something goes wrong or if there's kind of a branch for that, which totally makes sense. But there's like like I think we all kind of have our own quirks on this. Like I kind of do them all horizontally, and asking people that are not designers or even frankly designers to jump into these files and like decipher that layout is like asking a lot. And I think it's just like way easier, saves us a lot of time to sort of like group these in ways that make sense at like kind of first of all like a project level, and then from there like a flow and kind of feature level, and also breakpoints. So that's like another thing. There's kind of this new feature that we've just started using where like for instance these screens are not in there yet, but we're going to like upload these to this project. And really like what we're trying to do here is like we've mapped out this flow for mobile. We usually try to design things mobile first when we can. Usually if you can fit it on a phone, you can fit it on a larger screen, but that's not necessarily true the other way around. So but we still need to communicate how this thing is going to like display on other screens. So we're just going to upload those to this project. We're going to go find our untagged screens because these are all net new. And then we're just going to add a tag for these of like responsive behavior. So and then when I, now like as an engineer or, really whoever is interested can see like how this is going to display across all different breakpoints. In some cases, we need to like, make a different like mock for every state of every like on every breakpoint. But here it's like we intentionally try to, this is getting in the weeds a little bit, but like we're trying to intentionally design things for like lower maintenance. So if we make it mobile first for a feature that like there's really no value add to make it bigger on a bigger screen, this one falls into that use case. So yeah, it's pretty much the same across the board. There's let's see, this other feature where we can like group these as variants and sort of like combine that into one screen, which we're starting to do for our like anything that has like responsive behavior where there's a screen for multiple sizes. And this way from one link, we can share or anybody can see like all the different breakpoints from this one screen and like see how it appears across different breakpoints. The other thing here that we find like really helpful, just like from an iteration perspective, is like, so this project is sort of at a point where, say, like we've aligned with engineering and product and stakeholders on like what we're going to build here. But maybe say like, these right now are just password must contain XYZ. Let's say that we figured out, what those requirements really are going to be. It's something we're waiting on that we're just mocking up roughly, but like when those requirements come in, we can go in here and just say like, must contain a number. And try to ignore this really ugly type here. But yeah, so pretend I filled all those out, but basically like they've been updated with the requirements. Can just like hit upload to Zeplin, sync selected, and like this screen is not net new, so it's going to replace the old one, and now it has that like updated detail in it that wasn't there before. And this makes it really easy for us to like kind of have like the most up-to-date version that is available at a given time. And then like, as requirements change, like these kind of details, we can sort of keep those screens updated and add in more like higher fidelity as we learn things about the project, without having everybody like re-download a new file or go to a new link. It's like it's still in the same place. It's like we're just changing that one detail so that like whoever needs it has access to it. The other thing here that like we're starting to I mean, it's like, I guess starting isn't the right word. It's just ongoing, but design systems are, ever changing and you're never done. But that's kind of what's cool about them. But also, we're I guess what I'm saying is we're refining this more and more, and we're sort of getting to the point now where we have all these components in both our Figma design system and then our design system in Zeplin. So like, if an engineer is like, what does our input component look like? What are all the states of it? They can just click on that component, and then it ties back to our style guide or design system with all those components. And then from there, I guess they can isolate the states, which are all the variants that we have built out in Figma, but to see like, okay, so this is the default state of this. This is what this thing looks like in an error state. And then, if there's any delta, between that error state and the error state we see here, they can ask us and say like, what's going on here? Like, this seems wrong. And we can clarify, but usually, the goal is that all this stuff maps back to the component and kind of that source of truth. So really that's it. That's kind of like a high level look at sort of like some of the ways we organize our screens and like, how this kind of fits into our process. There's also a lot of just like, link sharing, obviously, of like, if like somebody's like, what's going on this screen, I can just copy this link, open it in my browser, send it to them. Yeah, just a really easy way to share stuff and keep people up to date.
Very cool. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing this awesome demo with us. And everything that you showed us really circles back to everything we were talking about here today in terms of, hey, there is a source of truth now because you have a locked design or finalized design of what to actually build. You just talked about how you have your components, your colors or textiles, everything in one spot. Can you talk a little bit more about like how developers really love to use Zeplin and the reasons why?
Yeah, I mean, I think without speaking too much outside of my field here, I think it's like the source of truth, I think, is the biggest thing, like having a clear source of truth. I noticed that we tie this kind of one of our next steps here is to connect this to Storybook. We haven't really gotten around to doing that yet, but there's nothing more frustrating than like having to redo something, especially when you were, it's because you were given the wrong instructions. Telling a developer like this is the thing to build, and then having them build it only to find out that those were the wrong instructions is pretty frustrating and just a waste of time. Nobody likes doing that. So I think like by us having all these things sort of captured here, it really like cuts down on the likelihood of that happening. Anytime there's a question about this, there's first of all, there's a source of truth that is agreed upon between us and engineering as like, this is right. It's not just what I say. If there's any questions about that, then we need to update the source of truth to like, make it right. Yeah, from a high level, I think it just like saves their time and makes it clear what we're trying to build with like really specifically. Like it doesn't leave things kind of open for interpretation. It makes sure that all our type styles are captured with all the details of them. And there's instead of having to type in like, oh, line height is 96 with a letter spacing of 0.25 pixels, but this other one is like 0.33. Like that's crazy to have somebody thinking about that. But our developers, they just have to type in like body 16, and all that is like built in. And there's a lot of steps to building that process from our design tool to Zeplin to Storybook to our site. But it saves a lot of time and frustration. Is the kind of headline.
Cool.
Yeah, it's kind of like you're like a cook, and you're like providing this recipe, or the developer is the cook and you provide this recipe to like the developer, right? It's kind of like, it's why you publish a cookbook. It's like you give that recipe and like they build the cake or whatever. But like if this was a digital cookbook and like the recipe's changing all the time, it's like you add some eggs. It's like, wait, no, actually there's no eggs in this recipe. You're like, oh, what the heck? I got to do this whole thing over again.
Right. Yeah, you got to start over, and like it's super frustrating. So, and like, I mean, it's frustrating for the whole team. Like it's like I don't want, like, we want to build cool stuff, and like if we, and useful stuff, and if we're spending all our time rebuilding stuff because we explained it wrong, like that's just not fun for anyone. So we try to, this helps us avoid that.
Totally. And I think what you said before in terms of now that you have a source of truth, you could develop and iterate faster. It really goes into how collaboration is more effortless now, and they could share the design work without having multiple copies, multiple Slack messages or emails. It really cuts down that time, right? Can you talk a little bit about how navigation is a little bit easier now within Zeplin? Just because before you kind of touched upon, even within the Figma file, one of your own designers, may have a whole different way to structure and organize things. But really curious on how navigation is a lot more helpful now within Zeplin and stuff like that. Can you share a little bit more about that, Steven?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it comes down to like, if I'm, these kind of rigid links that we were talking about earlier, but like if I'm, let's say I want to know how many digits are in the code for, this email confirmation form. Like, there's probably a product requirement doc for this that says this, but then there's a screen for it too. And if anybody has any confusion about that, if the engineer's saying like, well, why does your screen show 6 digits and the the requirements say 5, which one's right? I think like it really helps us for a first step to be like, are those things different? Like, let's go round those things up. And because it's easy to just say like, okay, here's this screen, like here's the link, like Slack it to everybody involved and say like, is this the right link? Is this the screen we're talking about? Like that, like, it's crazy how much time is spent where people are just talking about different things, or, you know, just not on the same page from the start. And like, this is a huge benefit to be able to do that really quickly and with that level of specificity. And then yeah, to basically like investigate whatever kind of deltas in our understanding of the project with like a solid tool that can like I guess everybody's like agreed on that this is the I don't know. I feel like there's a quicker way to say this, but there's a basically just easy way to share resources and get on the same page. Like if there's any confusion, like this helps us get on the same page quickly.
Steven, thank you so much for walking us through that demo. It really illustrates everything we talked about today in terms of having a source of truth, in terms of collaborating better with the whole product team. So that was really, really great. I'm just curious though, what exciting thing is coming next for Bombas?
Yeah, I mean, I think still a relatively new team here, so a lot of like foundational things that we're setting up, trying to like really like take our design systems to the next level and sort of like you know, the processes that we use to like update the engineering team on when that changes. Part of that is going to be like connecting Zeplin to Storybook. You know, it's like something that we want to do. We just like haven't really had the time to do it. But you know, excited to do that and think it'll help us kind of like tie the, you know, full chain of design system from like Figma to Zeplin to like actual code. So yeah, I think that's one of the things on our plate.
Very cool. Yeah, you're definitely taking the step forward to extend your design system over to developers. Just to double click on that, are you having your developers just do the whole Storybook thing, or are the designers helping out the developers? Can you share a little bit about that workflow?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit undefined right now. Like we haven't really dug into like how we're going to tie those things together. Like those conversations are just kind of starting, but like, you know, like we basically try to include as much documentation as we can for like our thinking about like how something is going to be used like now and in the future. But then like there's sort of a gap there right now for like how those docs tie into the docs that the engineers have in GitHub. So really like, I think we just need to sit down and like figure it out and kind of say like, okay, like, how's this going to work? How are we going to let you guys know when these things are updated? Like how, yeah, what's the process going to look like, and what are the tools we need to do it? But it seems like a good first step is just like directly linking the components in Figma, or in, well, I guess it's Figma to Zeplin to Storybook through the Zeplin to Storybook link.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm super excited to see that come to life here. And thank you so much for sharing that. Mike, is there anything else that you want to add on here?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I think it's really cool that like, I mean, I love the mission of Bombas, first of all, like, you know, giving clothes to homeless people every time you buy. Obviously, you're kind of donating to the homeless population, which is super powerful. And you actually mentioned something about the underwear. Is that right?
Yeah, so I think like, you know, Bombas started from this well before my time, but like need for like socks and homeless shelters, because you can't donate socks because they're, you know, socks are like pretty gross, frankly. And but they're really a need for those. And so that's why Bombas started with socks. But then, you know, underwear is kind of the same story, where like there's a need for like underwear for the homeless community, and it's not something like a shirt that you can donate, or, you know, like a pair of shoes or something. So it's you know, needs to be new. And so yeah, I think at the beginning of this year we branched out into underwear. Would highly recommend it. It's very comfortable. Check it out. Yeah, bombas.com. Just click on underwear. If you can't find it, then I haven't done my job, but I think you will.
Well, I definitely got to get myself a pair and try it out. But Steven, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your story on how Bombas is working with Zeplin and Figma. So thank you so much for joining us. And if you folks want to learn, cool, yeah, thank you. And if you folks want to learn more about Zeplin and Figma workflows, go over to zeplin.io, scroll all the way to the bottom, and there should be a Zeplin and Figma a link that you could click and learn some more. So thank you so much. Thank you, Mike, for joining me as well. And we'll see you folks in the next one. Take care, everybody.
My pleasure. See you.
Bye-bye.
Socks are the #1 most requested item in homeless shelters. Underwear is #2. And t-shirts are #3. That's why we make incredibly comfortable socks, underwear, and t-shirts. And we donate one for every one you buy. We've donated over 45 million items so far. Comfort for you. Comfort for those in need. Comfort for all. Get 20% off your first purchase at bombas.com.